Welcome to the AI Chat Podcast. Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by Adam Laor from Sinatra AI, a legendary company. Today, we're excited to break down what he's working on the podcast. Welcome to the show, man.
Dude, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So stoked to ask you a ton of questions about what you're working on and what's going on, but give us a little context, break down, give us a little bit of your backstory, man. How did you get into tech? How did you become interested and get into it?
Yeah. So born and raised in New York City. Started building and selling stuff on the web when I was probably 9 or 10. While I was in high school, I kind of got into tech somewhat illegally.
Okay.
In my sophomore year, I was actually eligible to graduate, but New York City forces you to sit in class, at least when I was in high school, 6 hours a day.
Okay.
So I was like, this is ridiculous. So my friend and I, long story short, got access to the New York City attendance database, and we would pre-mark ourselves present every Saturday of each month to just skip class. And then outside of that, kind of my first real set of chops in business was I actually headed up over-the-counter sales for an entire brick-and-mortar pharmacy in New York City called Town Pharmacy, Queens particularly. Grew that from low six figures of revenue to probably about, I would say, 3 to 3.5 million of over-the-counter revenue in about 2.5 years.
Oh, awesome.
And then, graduated high school in 2020. Got super infatuated with the ghost kitchen space. I got a tour of one of the first ever cloud kitchens in New York City by Travis from Uber.
Okay.
Didn't know it was Travis.
I heard that was super secretive when that was launching and he wouldn't
I mean, it's actually held under one or two parent co's. So the actual company that owns it, I think, is called City Storage Systems.
Okay.
It's super undercover. He just, literally maybe a week or two ago, actually started to become more public about it. But he hadn't really said a word publicly for, I think, maybe half a decade, something like that. Since I think I got the tour.
Is he still going hard on that?
Oh yeah, I think they've raised $2.5 billion.
I heard rumblings about it a while back, hadn't heard anything, and so I thought maybe it just had not worked out. Okay, it's going.
Oh yeah, he's raised a ton of Saudi money. He put a bunch of his own money.
Okay,
it's very much going. So yeah, that's kind of what brought me out to Phoenix, and then
because they were opening a bunch here.
Yep. So basically,
what's the reason for the here versus anywhere else?
So when COVID happened, it turned out that a lot of the big food and beverage executives in food and beverage, or hospitality overall, I should say, moved from the coasts inland to a place like Phoenix, Austin, places like that.
Yeah.
And so this kind of became like a sandhill road, if you will, for hospitality. Just the density of operators here was great, cloud kitchens included. And so I learned the Cloud Kitchens was opening most of their new locations here. And so I was like, all right, I want to open one. So moved down here and did that.
You opened one.
Yes.
You are not running a cloud kitchen today. So what happened?
So I started my own ghost kitchen. I met who ended up becoming one of my co-founders for Sinatra. Used to be one of the directors at the Phoenician and the Four Seasons here in town.
Okay.
Big restaurateur, very, very well experienced in the ghost kitchen business as well. And we hit it off. We went out to Gilbert, took over this large parking lot, allowed for families to order, meals for four. Probably 4 to 6 servings, I would say. And then we actually got shut down by the city of Gilbert because we violated a bunch of traffic laws. We took over this parking lot. When the golf course would close in the morning, we would take over at night. And during peak hours, there'd be 9 or 10 pickup lanes. 7, 8, 10 cars in each lane, one exit point. So it was just this massive jam. And so they were slap on the wrist, either write a check or shut it down. And we were we're going to shut down.
So was the idea of being in a parking lot free rent pretty much, or
it was actually to be pickup central or pickup centric, not delivery centric.
Okay.
What we were picking up on was, what the whole thesis around what Travis has with cloud kitchens is chef grade food delivered to your door at, maybe pricing that's the equivalent of being able to just go to the grocery store and cook it yourself. It's a really incredible, ambitious vision. But, the average American consumer is not down for a $25 chicken sandwich delivered semi-cold.
Right.
Obviously, if you're a Fox restaurant concept or an elevated brand, you don't control the delivery experience. There's a lot of fees that get accrued with that. So we thought, okay, pickup, you can cut down on fees. You have more control over the customer experience. It's fresh. So that's why we went for the parking lot. Yeah.
Gotcha. Got shut down. What do you do at this point? Are you like, let's pivot, move it somewhere else, or you're like, let's do something else?
So
'Cause was that like a ton of headache and work to spin that whole thing up?
brutal.
Yeah.
It was not only building out a tech stack for it, but I mean, thank God for Brian. It was also just the entire food and beverage operation itself.
Because you have to get like permits and safeties and
Permits. We had to do construction on the kitchen. We had to get like new ovens. We had to get staff. This was in like 2021, 22. So like staff in hospitality was still, I mean, even right now, it's
when
brutal.
you say you took over a parking lot, did you build a building in the parking lot, or you built like, I'm imagining tents?
So like basically there was this large empty parking lot where, you know, cars during the day would park and then like go golf. And then at night, the parking lot would become completely empty. But on the side of the golf course, there was a restaurant that needed to be basically, you know, reconstructed. And so we were like, you know what? We'll take on the cost of going to retrofit it
Gotcha.
as part of our business. And so we had this pod.
Oh, and then the parking lot just became the pickup zone.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Like fulfillment,
okay.
basically.
Okay. That makes sense.
So, yeah.
You're like, okay, we get shut down by the city of Gilbert.
Yes.
And
basically, you talk about permits and training and licensing and all that kind of stuff. We took a lot of those learnings, hiring staff, training the staff, and I basically went to Brian and was like, hey, you know, why was it such a pain in the ass to get all of this set up? I mean, can we go talk to some of the operators in town? Like, what are they using?
Yeah.
And so I went and I sat down with somebody who probably, you know, really helped bring and conceive of the concept that we know as today of like fast casual dining.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, like, what kind of technology are like you and your restaurant buddies using today? And he looked at me with a stone cold face and he was like, for the last 20 years, all we've used is point of sale, table management, online ordering. And I was like, there's just no way. And he like walked me around the restaurant and I was like, this guy's not kidding. This is insane. So we built a very large thesis on hospitality and why tech hasn't eaten the industry yet. And so we ended up starting Sinatra about a year and a half ago from today, a little over. And we ended up choosing to digitize training for staff in the industry.
Okay. So walk me through like what exactly Sinatra does. I mean, digitized training for staff. Like, what does that mean? I'm a new person coming to a new restaurant. How am I interacting with?
Yeah. So that's how it started.
Okay.
You know, today when you get hired, for the most part, if you're even getting trained, for the most part, you're getting paper and pen. There's a lot of staging. You know, it's expensive. People don't have the bandwidth. It's also in a way almost not even worth it nowadays because the churn is so high.
Right.
I mean, you know, you're losing employees every couple weeks, maybe every month at best. I mean, it's brutal, right? So why are you going to shell out $1,500, $2,000 per head when in 30 days you're just going to lose them, right? So we're like, okay, how can we make this more, you know, more efficient, more affordable? And then last spring, I got introduced to one of the top hospitality insurance brokers in the country, who's based here in Phoenix as well. His name's David DiLorenzo. He started a boutique agency maybe 20, 25 years ago called literally barandrestaurantinsurance.com.
Okay.
And he was like, hey, there's a huge part of training that has a correlation to compliance actually for an insurance use case and permitting and licensing and that kind of thing. And so he then, you know, I think he insures something like 400 or 500 bars and restaurants out here in Arizona.
Dang. Wow.
And he was like, look, man, I mean, if we can start to digitize some of these best practices to be able to track, you know, all sorts of different pieces of compliance information for the insurance companies to better help them with underwriting and risk rating and overall really their loss ratio of paying out claims, you know, there's a big opportunity there. So we did a pre-seed last summer, pivoted the strategy from training now into kind of insurtech for hospitality. So
prior to the pre-seed, had it all just been like bootstrapping it?
Actually, yeah. My co-founder and I, we started by putting literally just probably I'd say mid 6 figures of our own capital in to just get it off the ground. And then into last summer, we got up to probably about $500,000 of ARR in training revenue pretty quickly after about 4.5 months, I would say.
Okay.
And then once we saw the distribution opportunity of insurance, we were like, okay, this might be something interesting to go down.
Okay. So you do a pre-seed. How much did you raise in
probably about 1.7.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you do your pre-seed, make this pivot. what happens?
Yeah, so we did a pre-seed that was led by a fund in San Francisco called 1517. The GP there is Danielle Strackman. She built the Thiel Fellowship with Peter Thiel for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years.
Okay.
In that round was a very interesting strategic, an insurance company that's been around for maybe 72 years, over 70 years. Very small by total book of premium for most commercial insurance companies. I mean, I think it's sub $100 million.
Okay.
But all they write is hospitality, and they write it at a scale that competes with some of the largest commercial carriers in the country. Okay. So a very interesting kind of design partner, investor. I mean, they've been incredible. And so we started working with them, and besides just the training aspect of things, we realized, wait a minute, in terms of sales data, inspection receipts, audits, they're not getting really any information as it relates to, underwriting a policy and learning, okay, how do we even price or assess this risk, let alone protect their downside if a claim actually happens. So, we built out software that would help capture that data at the level of the policyholder whenever their policy comes up for renewal.
Okay.
So, restaurateur will go on, they'll submit their sales info, their training info, their inspection receipts, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It'll come back to the insurance company immediately. Previously, they weren't getting any of this. If they were, it would take them probably 2 to 3 months to actually get. And so, I think we ended May in just under 600 locations. And we'll probably get to around 2,000 at the end of June.
That's incredible. What has been your sales process? How are you getting into locations? How are you making
so we're actually selling to the insurance company.
Okay.
So we're not really dealing hand-to-hand combat at all with the restaurateur themselves.
Okay.
So we go and actually sell to the insurance company. They pay us per month per location, and then they actually just distribute us to all of their policyholders.
Oh, okay.
So that's the distribution mechanism. It's very interesting because for the most part, the last 20, 25 years, hospitality has primarily been, door-to-door combat, direct sales.
Right.
It's really hard when you've got over 1 million total locations in the country.
Yeah.
So being able to go sell to one party and, get distribution to hundreds, if not thousands of locations on a bad day, we realized, okay, there's real potential there.
That's amazing. So you're kind of in doing this now. How are you, I guess I've heard there's something with people tracking is there some element that you guys are doing with that? And
I can't go into too much detail on that, but what I will say is this. What does an insurance company value most? Decreasing their loss ratio.
Right.
And just for context, the loss ratio means how much an insurance company is actually writing in premium every year to
versus
how much
they're getting.
Well, versus how much they're paying out in claims.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And unfortunately, it's become standard in hospitality where most insurance carriers that are writing the business have a near, if not exceeding 100% loss ratio on the business. And a big reason why is we actually found that most insurance companies are writing hospitality establishments with little to no data. And that's leading to when a claim arises, their back is up against the wall and they have to just stroke a check. And so we've been able to circle kind of the main solution around that and how to start mitigating some of those claims at scale and really putting a dent and an improvement in those loss ratios, not only for the insurance company, but having that reflect in a significantly better premium for the restaurateur.
Okay.
So we're working on some interesting technology right now. We're probably going to start to publicize it, I would say, in probably the next 3 to 6 months.
Exciting.
Cool
stuff. And I've heard that you're implementing some different strategies with AI and things in there. I mean, is that in that, or I guess what are you doing with AI?
So I think there's a lot to be said about some of the data that we're capturing through, for example, not just sales and training documentation or inspection receipts, but also camera footage, for example. Being able to leverage, certain data points that the underwriters are getting through Sinatra to better improve how they're analyzing a risk. Like, for example, How many patrons are walking in the door every day? What's the demographic? How many drinks is each patron having? It's just as an example, it's a very different risk profile if your highest points of traffic are between, call it 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., as opposed to 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Very different risk profile, right? Also, in terms of demographic, if you're a country club and you've got an average age of, call it 50 to 75 years old, compared to you're a bar in, I don't know, downtown Tempe, right by ASU, where everybody's 18 to 22, very different risk profile, right? So being able to actually extract that data from the location for the first time and pass that back to the underwriter and to the actuaries is completely reinventing how people actually write insurance for hospitality.
I love that, because you could like probably ask the restaurant, hey, what's your average age of your patron, or what's like your average whatever. You can try to ask them, and they might some might give you data, some might be wrong, some might not. But yeah, you set up camera with footage and you can see exactly what's going on in a restaurant, and you can start categorizing that data and then building out models based off of that.
Totally.
What are you building stuff in house, or how is that looking with
Yeah, we're debating what we want to do at full scale. The main problem that we're starting to come across right now, I would say, is when you're distributing something that might include both hardware and software and machine learning at a scale of, call it, thousands of units, in many different states. And by the way, insurance is regulated, so there's all these different laws about, everything A to Z as it relates to how a restaurant runs and what that, how that correlates to a policy, for example. So we're tinkering with maybe doing some stuff ourselves from scratch, as opposed to maybe going off the shelf. That's kind of what the next couple months is going to be about.
Exciting.
Yeah.
That's exciting stuff, man. What are some of the biggest breakthroughs, innovations, things you see changing in the industry because of what you're doing over the next couple of years? Where do you see this all going?
I think if done correctly, what we're noticing is the data that we're extracting from these locations and bringing back into, an underwriter's hands would actually be able to free up significant dollars inside of the mandatory line item that is insurance for a hospitality establishment. And you're talking about anywhere from 10 or 15,000 a year for a tiny little pizza shop in New York City to, I don't know, let's say a full service restaurant today might be paying probably $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year in premium. And, nightclubs, big hotels, upwards of $250,000 a year in premium. That's a lot of money. And if you're able to save significant chunks, 20, 30, 40% on that premium, those are dollars that go right back to the bottom line, or those are more tables, those are more employees. So if you're able to unlock something of that magnitude inside of an industry where margins are historically unbelievably thin, the restaurant business is not sexy. The overall upfront cost and startup cost of starting a restaurant one day in 5 or 10 years could look significantly different. And also the way that a restaurant might be able to run their location based on the data that we're capturing, there might be some how would I put it, further decrease in startup cost for running operations that, frankly, they didn't even know could be digitized today.
Okay, super cool. So my other question that I'm just curious on how this, so you have this partnership with this big insurance provider. Awesome. Are they stoked if you go and work with other insurance providers? Are they no, we only want you to work with us? Or what's that relationship like? Because obviously this is an incredible way to get thousands of customers.
Yeah.
But is there an issue scaling? Are they cool with that?
I think hats off to them. They made it very clear from day one that they want to be a very, very supportive partner in bringing a change to the industry. And what's really interesting is they're probably the only one in the country that actually can, because this is all that they write, and this is all that they've ever written. Almost all other commercial carriers write many different lines of business.
Right.
Hospitality might be a peon to most. Whereas for these folks, they wake up every day and this is all they think about. Right. And so for them to, at scale, be able to bring a new change to the industry and signal to the rest of the market, hey, we got a head start. Sinatra now can go to the rest of the market. They've been very supportive of that.
That's awesome. So you're doing hospitality right now. Would you do other industries? Because I can imagine setting up a camera in like a construction zone and monitoring the situation there and gathering data would be interesting for insurance there. Have you thought of?
We've definitely been pulled by some folks in that direction for, again, a very similar set of problems.
Yeah.
But I think near term, we're pretty focused on hospitality because there's
market anyways.
Huge market, and you'd be shocked, but the variables of different industries in terms of underwriting are enormous. Construction to hospitality, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, liquor doesn't exist in construction.
Right.
It does, obviously, in hospitality. I mean, a lot of places sell alcohol. The second you include liquor inside of a location, everything gets thrown up in the air. Just that small little detail, right? Which then, pushes when you're thinking about engineering and product, a totally different line of thinking if you were just building for a construction site. Right. And I don't know much about construction, but I'm sure there's all sorts of variables there that don't exist in hospitality, like cranes and, things like that. So we want to stay focused on one industry for now, one vertical.
That's awesome. I know you've worked with some people here locally in Arizona. Do you imagine this expanding? Are you doing this nationwide or is this geographically based?
So we started with a rollout solely in the state. But as we speak, we're expanding to, I think, a total of another 16 states.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would say everywhere excluding the coasts, like New York and California, we're staying out of right now, simply because, insurance laws there are just brutal. But yeah, I would say like Midwest. Yeah.
That's cool. That's amazing. Where do you see Sinatra in 3, 4, 5 years? What's your vision?
I think Sinatra will have captured a massive opportunity inside of the category of hospitality insurance. I don't want to say created a new category because hospitality insurance exists already. Like every restaurant or bar, hotel needs insurance. But, a market of one is not a market.
Sure.
And so I think we would have unlocked something significant. I think the way that we unlock it at scale is still to be determined. Because there's a lot of interesting ways that we can bring this to the world, some of which have significant reliances on, or I should say, significant reliance on industry change, where inside of commercial insurance, nothing has really ever changed. Period, since the first ever policy was written, compared to say us being the change. So hopefully we would have brought that solution to the market, and the way we do it, I think, we'll see.
Amazing. So much is happening with AI. You're doing some cool stuff there. What are other areas maybe that you are looking at that AI unlocks, new efficiencies for you guys and what you're doing?
So, bit of a controversial take.
Okay, I love it.
I think what I've seen and read and heard about most as it relates to a lot of the new AI products getting built today is selling them to software companies, and enabling, the knowledge worker, law firms, consulting practices, investment bankers, things like that, right? Startups. I think there's a tremendous lack of focus, but enormous opportunity in what I would call the 90% of the remaining 90% of the economy, which is everything outside of like New York and San Francisco. Just traditional industry.
Yeah.
Construction, real estate, hospitality. Those are industries that are still, frankly, trying to get to full adoption of Web 1.0 and 2.0, let alone like AI and generative AI, things like that. I think I have yet to have seen tooling that could go to those industries, or at least in terms of at least nearly the amount of volume of the companies that are getting built for, like I said, the knowledge worker industry. I think there's enormous opportunity in the other 90% of the economy. So we'll see. I wonder who's going to go capture that. It's got to go get captured. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Well, so much is changing. This is amazing. Thanks so much, Adam, for coming on the show and talking about what you're working on. If people want to get in contact with you or follow up more with what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn, probably. That's really what I use most.
Okay.
Yes, I think Sinatra, we are www.sinatra.ai. So
Amazing. And to the listener, I'll leave links in the show notes to his LinkedIn and to Sinatra.ai. And you'll be able to check out everything they're working on. Thanks so much for tuning into the podcast today. Hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and make sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts.